1 second. Oh, we're good. Okay, go ahead, Yulia. Thank you.
Good morning. The Board of Licensed Dietitians meeting is convening at 9:04 a.m. on Wednesday, April 19th at the Health Licensing Office in Salem, Oregon by telephone conference call. I will now call the roll. Yulia Bragdorf here. Jerry Yoker.
Here.
Bert Connell.
Oh, Bert is not on the board anymore. I apologize.
Russ Kegel.
Here.
Sarah Lowe.
Here.
Jessie Polinik.
She is not going to be present today, so you don't have to call her name in any of the voting.
Okay. Members, when you wish to speak, please state your last name for the record. Board members are asked not to use the chat feature during the meeting. Public members wishing to speak must first sign in with the roster available sheet. For public members calling on the public phone line, please email April Fleming at april.fleming@dhsoha@state.or.us and provide your first and last name. Public and interested parties' feedback may be heard during the public interest feedback period if indicated on the agenda. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and protocols when conducting board business. This meeting is now called to order.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yulia. Well, the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So we will need a motion to approve, a second, and a roll call vote, please.
Okay, is anyone would like to make a motion?
Euchre, I move we accept the agenda.
And is anyone interested in seconding the motion?
I second the motion.
And who was that, please?
Oh, Sarah Lowe.
Sarah, okay.
I second the motion.
Okay.
Thanks.
A motion has been made. I call the roll. I'm looking for all the names. 1 sec, please. And would you be able to, since you have a list who is here, who is not, would you be able to help me please to call the roll?
Absolutely, I will.
Thank you.
So a motion, of course, a motion has been made to approve the agenda. The motion was made by Dr. Euchre and seconded by Sarah. I'm going to call the roll, answer with aye or nay. Yulia.
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Dr. Euchre.
Aye.
And Russ.
Aye.
Excellent. So the agenda has been passed unanimously. So moving on, we are going to do the director's report. Again, Interim Director Bothwell has been called away for an emergency phone call, so I'm doing this on his behalf. There's a couple of things on the director's report. One is at the last meeting, members were interested in the office adding some clarifying language to renewals concerning cultural competency continuing education and the timing on continuing education, because we have obviously licensees that have yearly continuing education requirements, and then we had that extra cultural competency that's every other time. And there was some interest at the time of the office adding language on the renewal to make that very clear. And we did that immediately after the last meeting. I'm not bringing a license to show it to you because I would have to redact so much information on it. But it was done, and that has been going on since the last meeting. So there's a couple of other things, and I'm hoping Tina can, our licensing manager, can chime in. It is understood that we have in this profession managers who are renewing licenses for their employees or their the people they supervise, and there's some complications with that. Tina, can you help me?
Sure. It's been brought to our attention that there is managers or whoever you're working under is renewing licenses for individuals. There's a lot of questions on there that have to be answered by the licensee themselves. So if a supervisor or manager is taking that responsibility on, I would definitely recommend that you actually have their renewal notice, because if you mark that they've never had a, in the last year since their last renewal, do not have a felony or misdemeanor, and they're not on probation or parole, and you're self-attesting that they've done their CEs, and then they find out later that they have not completed any of that, and there's an investigation open, then it's going to fall back on that licensee, but then it's also going to be brought up that a manager or supervisor is the one that submitted that renewal. So does anybody have questions on that? Because that is a fine line that a supervisor or manager would be taking on that responsibility to renew for somebody when there's so many questions to be asked. So I guess I want to ask you all, if any of you have done that, is the licensee giving you their renewal with all the information on it prior
This
to
is
you
this is
renewing?
Brogdorf. This makes little sense. I mean, I've never worked. I mean, that in a setting where this would be, in my opinion, appropriate. It seems like license. It's not the credential of the insurance company that some person who's responsible for credentialing would be doing this work. Something like license, I believe, especially when it comes to attestation, it says, I do attest hereby. So unless there is some sort of document saying that somebody else can attest for me, and information is provided for the purpose of attestation, this makes no sense. That would not be done by the individual licensee, but it would be done by licensee supervisor. It makes no sense to me.
Okay,
Table here.
go ahead.
Why can't we just have the licensee sign off before they submit it?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Are you getting the actual renewal notice that is sent that they have to fill out? And are they giving that to you? And are you holding that for record prior to renewing their licenses?
Okay.
Is that what you're doing?
This is Brogdorf again. My thinking is that it's done because the agency is paying for the license, so somebody else, because they have access to the card number, is doing it. But I think the attestation should be kept on file regardless. So there is individual still the person who's attesting to all of those elements. How does the
So
medical board do that?
we're not under the medical
I
board,
know,
so
but this is my question. I understand you're not on the medical board, but how does, because that would be the board that would have overseen overseen many providers are overseen but let's say hospitals. So I mean, how do other boards do that? Look at that.
well, we
The
do know
Board of-
that.
Okay, the Board of Athletic Trainers, Kegel here. Board of Athletic Trainers would make certain that the person that's submitting it has reviewed it.
Reviewed what?
The licensee would have reviewed it and authorized that this is correct.
Okay, are they keeping that on file since they're the ones taking, I mean, you're attesting to somebody else's licensing
Okay.
renewal.
Right.
So-
Now, if the company is paying for it, all right, that's fine. But they should give it back to the licensee to review it, and the licensee should sign off on it and then submit it.
I think that's kind of backwards, because I would think the licensee is the one that's mailed the renewal notice. The licensee should fill out all of the appropriate documentation, sign it for you, date it, give it to you, and then the individual would renew online using the credit card. But
That makes sense.
I'm hearing different, that they're going on renewing. I mean, if I'm not hearing this correctly, let me know. But a business can't go on and renew somebody's information and then make them sign it afterwards that what they entered was true and correct. Because
Okay, but basically what I'm trying to prevent is for the company to pay for it. Okay, the licensee is going to give it to the company to pay, right?
okay,
And it's already filled out. All right. Now, how do we know that there has not been any altercations?
well,
Here,
see, I mean, this is a slippery slope for all, because the individual actually should be renewing it, getting the receipt, and the employer reimbursing them. That, I mean,
Correct.
that would be the most
That would be
legitimate
the
way
ideal.
to do that, correct? And then you're not held responsible for what you
Correct.
did.
Correct.
Tina, this is Ann. If I can kind of
Yes.
maybe clarify this a little bit. The reason this conversation came up was based on a comment at a previous meeting, I don't remember who did it, that said it was very common practice for big employers to renew on behalf of their employees. And that led us, as you know, it kind of made our ears perk up a little bit and say, well, wait a minute. If you are renewing on behalf of your employees, there's information, legally binding information on those renewals that a person is signing that they haven't been arrested or convicted. And, you know, and so we were wondering if employers, and perhaps in their effort to help and be efficient, were actually taking on risk that should be on the shoulders of the licensee. And that's what prompted this conversation. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. Well, it doesn't sound like anybody here is confused on that. So if we all kind of understand how the machinery works and we're all doing our part, we're okay. Tina, does that about cover it?
Yep. Thanks, Ann.
No, thank you very much, Tina. So those were the only things that we had. We do have, we'll remind you again, we're in legislative session right now, and there are a number of bills still floating around out there. We've kind of made it to the halfway point, and not that you guys follow legislation really closely, but there are hurdles that bills, I mean, there's a flood of them. We had over 3,000 this year. I've never seen anything like it. And there are hurdles, timelines that bills have to, you know, get over those hurdles in order to stay alive. Now, there are still Christmas tree bills kind of at the end where they have these generic open bills that they can cram things in and survive. And we have one of those that I listed in your materials because it directly kind of impacted your world. But we're watching a few of them right now. One establishes a new board with us for sign language interpreters. One creates a new program where we would be licensing dental labs. We just got our first business license last year with the temporary staffing agency program. This would be another one. And there are probably 6 or 7 additional bills out there that would affect us on one level or another. But those are the big ones that seem to have what we call legs. They're moving. Now, once they get all the way through one side, if they're introduced in the Senate, they have to get all the way through the Senate. Then they jump over to the House and they have to make it all the way through that. So right now we're sort of in that pause period where all the paperwork is shifting over to the other side. And we can talk a little bit more when we get to the policy section on House Bill 2803. So does anybody have any questions? No? Well, you guys are awesome. So we are going to go to licensing and fiscal. If you are following along, the first one is licenses issued. And again, I'll repeat for the record because it's very confusing. The state's fiscal years are not like regular years. They go from January to December. Our fiscal years go from July 1st to June 30th of the following year, which is why you see 3 quarters of fiscal year 23, because we are actually in fiscal year 23. So if you notice licenses issued, you know, you're still growing. We have a total of 556. On the next slide, we have licenses renewed, and we split them into paper and online. Online is always preferable because the process first of all, it's easier for the licensee to renew online. And also we handle less paperwork, and less paper saves trees, saves us work. It's very efficient, and we can turn work around more quickly. So we always appreciate when we have such a high number of licensees that are renewing online. Licenses by age and gender, again, predominantly female, predominantly young field. We do have an other category. We can't make people tell us, or they might identify as non-binary, in which case you see the gray other category. But again, predominantly women. License volume trends, just since Q1 of fiscal year 21, compared to where we are now, we have 200 more licenses. Again, as an analyst, I get calls. Looks like more and more dietitians are being employed in preventative medicine, preventative steps with insurance companies to help people not become diabetic or manage it when they get it. And so it's a growing field. And we have our finances, which is amazing. Our goal is for you guys to have a cushion in case you have a case, because your ending balance right now is about $240,000. If you had a case that went to a hearing, that would be gone in a hot second. Legal fees it's like a vacuum. So we like to maintain a cushion, but we don't want to be the bank of licensed dietitians. So our goal is to have your revenues and your expenditures about match up. And you're about $2,500 on the positive. That's really close for what we're spending to take care of the board and what we're bringing in. And that is just terrific. That's our goal. We don't want you going in the red, but we also don't want you to be in a position to, become the bank of the dietitians. Any questions?
Bragdorf, I have one question.
Yes, Julia.
Little related, little unrelated.
Okay.
What does a licensed dietitian do when they encounter online renewal situation where they submit the survey, they submit the payment, and the system just goes nowhere and it does not print out receipt? So they do it again and they submit 2 or 3 payments. And the system does not tell them, the process just tells them an error has occurred. Personally encountered this situation. You can note that I paid for my license twice this year. And how does one go about it? Who does one bring attention to something like that? I wonder if it happened to one person, probably happened to others as well. And someone has a hand up.
Yes, and that we have an in-house database expert, Nathan, and he can help with that. And if a double payment does occur, then Tina can tell you about how the office handles that. Nathan?
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so some of the problem can lie at our end. A lot of the time it can be at the user's end too. There's different browsers people use, whether they've been updated, internet traffic flow. If you're unsure, your best bet is to go online and check your bank statement. If we took it out, it renewed. If you have a question at all, you are more than welcome to email me or call me on my work phone, and I can look it up for you. If you do double pay, then by some chance, I would need to refer you to Tina, our licensing manager. But if you're not sure if you hit it and it times out and you're like, I don't know if it went through, you can give me a call and I can double check.
Tina?
Yes, also it is, if it is caught, when it comes through the system, it's usually refunded right away back to your card. So, but I would definitely not keep doing it. I would definitely call the office to see if there is some kind of problem online that's not working, or if you're using, like Nathan said, the correct computer or iPhone. I mean, sometimes it won't work on some of the items that are being used. And then we can double check, but remember, it takes 24 hours for that to process. So we would not know if you called us that day or the next day. You're going to have to wait for a while to see if it actually came through.
And if I can support Tina's comment, we also encourage people not to decide to renew at 11:50 at night when their license goes inactive at midnight 01, because there's all kinds of technical problems that can exist. And if you're down to the wire like that, it makes sorting out issues more difficult for everyone.
Thank you, everybody. I'm hoping it's going to be helpful for people, for licensees. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's very, very hard when we have one interface and there are how many devices out there. You know, people try to use their phones. You know, we all know how difficult it is to get tech to talk to each other. And then there are subsets of difficulties. And so we are aware of that. We can't fix it all because sometimes it's on the user end, but we are perfectly willing to help you sort out whatever your problems are. Just make sure that you allow enough time to sort that out. So, we good?
Thank you, everybody.
Of course. Thank you, Yulia. That's a wonderful thing to bring up. So if we don't have any questions on the financials or the licensing information, I can turn over the regulatory report to Trampus.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, Trampus.
Yes.
So, all right. It wasn't clicking for some reason. Hi, I'm Trampus. I'm the interim regulatory manager, and I'm here to present the regulatory report to you. There's not a whole lot to present. We've got one biennium on here with that still has open cases, which is the current biennium we're in. In that biennium, we've had 3 cases come in, 2 of which are still open and being investigated. There's a little bit of a breakdown between licensing concerns and services provided. And I can answer any questions that anybody has about any of this. I'll do my best to answer them. All right. Nobody has any questions? I'll turn it back over to Ann.
Okay, thank you, Trampus. And again, the regulatory report for confidentiality purposes is listed in the most generic way. If you had any specific questions about cases in the future, we would have to have an executive session and honor the confidentiality requirements. So with that being said, we're going to go on. There was one bill that we found, and I included it in your packet, that related to dietetics in general. And one of the things that we've noticed, bills often mandate. That's the point of it, right? And we're seeing more and more of the legislature wanting studies done. They want to study access to, I don't know, algal bloom information, or they want to study. And so you get bills that are not issuing a license or putting requirements on anything, but demanding that a study be done. This is one of those. So 2803 talked about the health authority, which is our mothership. We're just a small piece of them, would study the establishment of a license program for nutritionists. Now, this is not a license. This is just the idea of it. And this particular bill, when I mentioned it before, has not had a public hearing. It has not had a work session. It hasn't cleared any of the hurdles that a bill would have to clear in order to be considered alive. I included this, first of all, for the board and licensees who may check on this, to know that it's out there, to understand that Representative Sosa, Nose, Reynolds were interested in this concept enough to put forth a bill. And just because maybe it doesn't go through this session doesn't mean it won't show up again. And if there are questions out there, perhaps an association can get in touch with them. I know they talked about facilitating health insurer reimbursement for services provided by nutritionists. So again, we're talking about reimbursement. We're talking about access to nutrition advice. And so this doesn't really affect your license. Just know that at the legislative level, again, we're the executive branch. They make the laws, we carry them out. The judicial branch interprets those laws, that there is some interest out there in this concept. But again, I brought this to you for your information. Doesn't look like this bill has any legs this session, but it ain't over yet. And I just thought I'd bring it to your attention if it was of interest to you. So does anybody have any questions on the board? No? You guys are easy. Okay, so you're probably taking pity on me because I'm the B team. Okay, so that brings us to public and interested parties feedback. Yulia,
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
I'm sorry, this is Sarah. I was just sorry, I was reading the bill
That's
over a
okay.
couple of times. I apologize. So I just am curious, is there a definition that they are using for nutritionist? Any type of education or any requirements for that term? Or is it, when I'm looking at, they're talking about, looking into access and reimbursement.
Mm-hmm. Well, first
what,
of all,
what are they defining a nutritionist as?
First of all, I applaud the fact that you would ask that question, because that's the first question we all ask is, what is that? And for the purposes of this bill, it is not defined.
It could be anybody just saying I'm a nutritionist and then falling under that category.
Sure. Or it could be something where, and we did this in board training, but I love this, so we'll go back and talk about it again. Sometimes bills have what are called exact language, right? Exact language would be 18 years old, at least 18 years old, easy to prove, at least a bachelor's degree in the arts, easy to prove, right? And then you have inexact terms like this, like nutritionist. Well, two people are going to have a radically different definition. And then you have delegative terms where the bill might say the Board of Licensed Dietitians has to define nutritionist. Okay, and then that gives you the power to do it. This is definitely, and I love that you brought this up, an inexact term. So one would posit that during the study, if this were to pass, and as I said, it seems to be dead in the water, the health authority studying this would then be tasked with defining, describing. Okay. Maybe during the study, they would have to say, okay, we've got 5 different levels as we did this study. And that's what is kind of nice, because what this is saying is that we don't know. And they are asking the health authority to study the practice, maybe credentialing, maybe access, maybe reimbursement rates, and that would give anybody who has a study like this to do would then go forth and define and give all of that information to the legislature. Now, we've had other studies, we haven't done them, but we've been adjacent to them, that have gone to the legislature, and we don't always know what they do with the information. Would they use that to then explore future concepts for registrations, or we don't know what would happen with that. This is the legislature saying, go find this stuff and tell us what you find. And that's why it says Section 1 of this act is repealed, because they don't want this study to go on in perpetuity. This is one of those one and dones. If it were to pass, which I told you it's not looking like it will, if it did, they would do the study and then it would be done on January 2nd. It's not something they have to keep going to study, because honestly, if they don't put a repeal date, then it would just go on in perpetuity. And that doesn't seem to be very useful. So this looks like just a one and done study about nutritionists and access. Does that help, Sarah?
It does, yeah, thank you.
Of course. So just know that it's out there. And even if the bill is gone, dead, the interest, apparently somebody, usually it's an association, would come to a legislator and say, there's an issue out there that we need to see if future legislation is required, or customizing current registrations, or some change that needs to be made on a legislative level. And this is an example of go find out. So, and there's a whole bunch of these study bills that are out there, and we don't know, will it come back? Will something come out of it? We don't know. But as individuals, not members of the board, because you can't wear that hat and approach a legislator, can't do that. But as an individual or a dietitian, you wearing that hat, feel free to contact any of these legislators and say, yes, I'm on the board, but as a licensed dietitian, I'm curious about what the issues were that prompted this bill. And that's certainly something you can do and find out more about what was going on behind the scenes that led to this. Is that helpful?
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Excellent. Any more questions about 2803? Nope. Okay. So with that being said, hang on, let me check the phone. Hi, this is Ann Thompson at the Health Licensing Office. Do we have anybody on the public phone line?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have two voices.
I will let you go first.
Okay. So my question is, before we have to read the script, and then what I was wondering is if you would like to speak, if you would send your information to April Fleming so that we can enter into the record who you are. And if you have a pen, it's april.fleming@oha.state.or.us. So we can enter that into the record. And if you would like to, one of you or both would like to take turns, I will have our board chair open us into public comment.
At this time, the Board of Licensed Dietitians will hear public and interested parties' feedback. Members of the public, please wait until you have been recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and affiliation to the board for the record.
Okay, who would like to go first, please?
Gentlemen, go first. I'm just listening.
Oh, okay.
Cannot
So we have somebody listening. Hang on one second. We're going to adjust the volume. Okay.
I have a question, if nobody's going.
Okay, and can you identify yourself, please, for the record?
Sure, my name is Valeria Malik. I am a practice owner, a registered dietitian. And my question is, going back to what was discussed earlier about managers renewing license. I have a question that may help kind of think about this is, as a busy dietitian who runs a practice myself, I find sometimes that renewing my license, it takes some time, especially because we have a PIN number, and this year I didn't get a PIN number. And then that being that I had to pay $200 for my renew because I never got a PIN number. And it seems a little frustrating sometimes where I don't have the information, it takes too long of a time. And I was just wondering, it sounds like the board has some money, and I was wondering if it would be possible to invest some money on making the process to renew the license a little bit easier.
Tina?
Well, what I wanted to say about the PIN number, your PIN number stays the same and will never, ever, ever change. So if you would like to call me, I can give you your PIN number. And as long as you have your license number and your PIN number, you should be able to renew online without any problems. And you're on mute. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I just say that, we have a login password to remember. Now we need a PIN number to remember. It seems nowadays, I think, it's easier. If it was an easier process, I didn't have a PIN number. I just wonder, is there an easier way? Because it's just putting another barrier for somebody to remember, keep track of. I feel, at least for me, is a barrier. Like, I don't remember my PIN number. I barely remember my password, but let me reset my password. So anyway, I would, knowing how busy I am, I just would love the process to be a little bit easier, which will prevent me to, for one, make sure my license is renewed online, because nobody wants paper. And two, we'll do it in a timely manner. And then three, will prevent from, other clinic managers perhaps to do for me, because I want to do it. I just have some barriers in my way because the process can be a little bit cumbersome.
Okay.
I have a suggestion.
Who is speaking, please?
My name is Cindy Kitchen, and I'm a registered dietitian in a hospital setting. If we're going to stay with those PIN numbers, why don't you switch them to our registered dietitian number, and then we won't ever forget it, because it's the number we already use for everything else we use. At least that's one thing that it's always the same for all of us. And as far as the renewal process, it's just a matter, I don't understand how you can have managers doing it, because you do have to certify that you haven't done those things, but it's a very short survey, and it only takes a few moments to go right into the payment process. And my employer does pay for me at that point, but I'm in my account when that's the case. But otherwise, I agree you would have to submit that. I have several other questions or observations as well, when you're ready for that.
Okay. Valeria, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
Okay.
On top of that, I would just ask a little more reminders, perhaps, if there's some money to be invested in that specific thing. Can we send text message reminders?
No.
Just something to remember. Some dietitians, they have additional credentials, so it's not just dietitians. We have other boards. There's so many things, and I will completely agree. Nobody should be doing this but the dietitians. But I just wonder if the board can assist into making the process a little bit easier and more reminders. And hey, this is how easy it is. People want to make things easy nowadays. So I know it's a big shift that we are moving to more technology, and I just ask that we invest some money or some resources in that.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Cindy, would you like to make a comment? And please identify yourself for the board.
Yes, I have several comments just from listening, but I actually wrote in a letter beforehand. And my name is Cindy Kitchen. I'm a registered dietitian in a hospital setting in Corvallis here. As far as that bill, is there any other nutritionist, quote, that is licensed besides dietitians? And if so, then every bill like that should say dietitian, because we aren't nutritionists, like you said. That's a kind of a generic word. I don't know that any other agency is even going to hire somebody else that's a nutritionist that they need licensing, but I don't know. That's just a question. What I called in and wrote in about was related to the continuing education component that we are required for the culturally appropriate and the ethics component. And I'm requesting that you broaden the scope of the classes you can take. We received a list. That list is so generic. It's for acupuncturists, it's for hairdressers, it's for nail people, and it has really nothing whatsoever to do with our profession. And we are a profession. I really suggest, I believe that you should change and broaden that so that any class that's approved by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and the CDR is allowed to be accepted, because those are more specialized and specifically targeted to the things that we need. I work in the hospital. I have to sit on an ethics board at times deciding whether or not to take off advanced life support off of somebody who has no family, that has nobody to speak for them. Those are the kinds of trainings that I need to get, not the ones that are supposed to be general, but they aren't very useful. I have already got under my belt probably half a dozen this year classes that all are ethics classes from the Academy that have to do with medical care for transsexuals. Specific things that are related to what I need to do and I know. And I think that that for Oregon to be saying I can only take off of this list of these approved classes is not very logical when my original licensure comes from national licensure. I think that I hate to say it, but I think you're micromanaging what a professional person should do and not allowing us to take the classes that are more appropriate. And I think that that's something that you should change immediately. You should just allow us to take the approved classes that we can get from CDR, which is what we have for our licensure in the first place.
Okay, Cindy, I have a couple of clarifying questions for you. When you talk about ethics and the required list, are you mixing the cultural competency requirement with the dietetics requirement? Because there's that additional cultural competency.
It's the additional cultural competency that I don't read every single thing that you guys send us, or you just wait until it comes through and eventually see it be what we have to do. But I have those cultural competency classes from A&D, from CDR, and they're specific to what we do.
Sure.
And I think that I don't think we should be limited to that the list of which ones are appropriate for my profession. Those are just generic for everybody. Why can't I take the ones that have that relate directly to what I do and to the clients I speak to, the people that have the language barriers, or the fact that I have to go and to get the sign language, those things, I should be able to take the classes that relate to what I'm doing, versus these very generic ones that cost me money, cost me time, and that aren't actually advancing anything for my education. I really believe that you should allow, I'm not saying take away, I'm just saying allow us to take the ones that are within our license, or our registered dietitian, or license, listen, you're the license, the registered dietitian, the things that I have to do anyway. And they're going to be required. So that's my request. I would request that broaden it so that the professional process can be used instead or as well as those that you already have on the list.
Okay, well, Cindy, I can actually address that on behalf of the board if they're okay with that. That requirement did not come from our board. That requirement came from House Bill 2011, which came out in, I think it was 2019, where it was a legislative mandate that a certain list of boards, including the licensed dietitians, would have to get a certain number of hours in cultural competency from the list that was curated by the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and they had to get it every other time they renewed. This is not under the purview of the board. This was a legislative requirement. So it is not something that we're in a position to change or expand.
So is that not something you cannot request them to? We're just not, I'm not objecting to taking the classes. I already have the classes. But again, it's not specific. Don't they want the best of care for their clients? Don't they want the best of care for the people in the state board? Is this not something that perhaps you should be taking some of those funds you do indeed have and advocating for that best practice? Because those are repetitive classes. Those are the kind that you sit there and you push the button waiting for the next thing to happen because you're not learning anything new. It's nothing, and it's certainly not up to date if it was 2019.
No, the bill that created the requirement was in 2019. That was the piece of legislation that made the requirement, was from the 19 regular session. Trainers and associations are welcome to reach out, and we have mentioned this several times, because it is not the position of the board as the executive branch to push back against the legislature. We carry out the laws, but associations and people that are offering trainings are encouraged to reach out. There's actually a method that they can get their classes approved. And we have said this from the beginning. The trainers can reach out, the associations that are offering this great information can reach out to the Office of Equity and Inclusion and say, we're offering these educational opportunities, and it would be appropriate for dietitians or whomever they think it would be appropriate for, and get their courses approved and on the list through the Office of Equity and Inclusion. So there is a method.
Would you have to be saying it's a specific class, or if the academy went and said, we offer every year we have new ones, but we offer classes that they're not always the same classes, but would they be able to say any classes that we offer that are ethics and diversity classes, would they be accepted? Can it go in that route, or do you have to have a specific class? I
know that they approve these courses, but I am not the expert in how that division, that's a separate division of OHA, how they do things. That information is available, just like we have our purview, that's their purview, and there are forms and things like that. How they approve classes, I don't really know. That's their purview, but any person offering a training is welcome to reach out to them and get their materials offered for the appropriate professionals.
Right, and it's highly unlikely. The last one I listened to was from South Carolina, from the South Carolina Academy. It's not likely that most groups are going to go and appeal to the state of Oregon for any particular reason unless they can get a blanket coverage. So again, I guess that just put us in a situation where we're hitting repetitious classes that really are not effective they just don't, they cost money and they don't really, cost money, cost time, and don't really meet the needs of the people. Okay. All right, I guess I guessed the wrong group.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your information, Cindy, and for phoning in today.
Right, and could she send me the name of that group, because I don't, I have the email track going back and forth with
Cindy, I will get you a link, because what's even more interesting is I think that the Office of Equity and Inclusion in the last legislative session actually had their name slightly adjusted, but I will send you a link to their webpage with the cultural competency information on that, and I'll do that when I get out of this meeting, okay?
Thank you very much.
Of course, you're very welcome.
Right, I'm one of those people that take tons of classes, and I've had many of diversity classes in just a year. All right, thank you.
I totally understand. Thank you, Cindy. Is there anybody else on the phone line with a question?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Martin, and I've already emailed April.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a question. It's not, I don't know if I can bring it up here, and it's okay if it's not appropriate or if it's not along the lines of everything, but is there a change to telehealth that can be provided? Was there something that recently came up about that?
Can you be more specific? Or
yeah, that's okay. So I live in Kentucky, and we have a facility out in Oregon, and I got my licensure for Oregon, and I come out there and I provide service for them currently until they can get that position filled. And through the grapevine somewhere, I have heard that they may be taking away telehealth at some point soon. I don't know where this information came from, but I kind of wanted to touch base with this board to see if you all were aware of that, if you knew anything about that, so I could kind of just know more information. I was actually looking on, I work in kidney care, and so I was looking on the network, the renal network, and it said that telehealth is here to stay. With one thing that said, but, you know, I have no idea. I just wanted to ask about that.
Well, if I may, members of the board, there is nothing in your statutes that prevent it. And I have heard of no legislation or any umbrella concept. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm not, you know, but I'm just saying
yeah, you're good. Yeah.
nothing like that has come across my desk.
Okay.
Director Bob Bothwell has joined us and he's shaking his head. So yeah, I don't know where that came from, but I would encourage you, Jennifer, to, my email is available if you want to talk to me offline, or I can send you, you know, your laws and rules. They're also available on the website. But again, the license in Oregon is a title act, not a practice act, which means as long as you don't call yourself a licensed dietitian, you're fine. The work itself is not protected. So as far as how that would even be limited as far as telehealth, I can't even fathom. So yeah, I appreciate you reaching out though, because there's a lot of information out there and not all of it is good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would kind of like to talk to you because that, you know, to be honest with you, there's just some things that, I mean, like you said, there's just so much out there, and maybe you could help clarify some things for me and stuff. So.
I would be more than happy if you.
What is your email?
My email is Anne, A-N-N-E, .p, as in Paul, .Thompson, THOMPSON, at OHA.state.or.us. Or you can just pick up the phone and give me a call.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for calling in today.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else on the phone line with a question or a comment? We had a busy phone line today. Okay, well, if they're hearing none, Yulia, we are on other board business. Is there anything the board would like to have on the agenda for the next meeting, which is slated for October 4th? Hopefully by then we would have seen some sunshine.
My only comment is in regards to, maybe we can discuss it later because I don't know if it's going to be pertinent or not pertinent. So I'm going to hold off for now until I'll talk to you, Anne, because of the question that showed up. But perhaps we can discuss it if you want to put on the agenda.
Okay, Yulia. Why don't you know, at your convenience? I know you're really busy. Get in touch with me. We can set up a time and chat. And if it's something that would be appropriate to add for discussion or a point, I'd be more than happy to add that to the next agenda.
Thank you.
So we'll get up together, Miss Yulia. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns, things? Oh, well, hearing none. We're almost at a beautiful hour. Yulia, if you would like to see us out.
All right. The Board of Licensed Dietitian meeting is adjourned at 9:57 a.m. on Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.